A challenge I often see with my writing clients is that they want to make some sort of change in their writing life. Say they want to start writing consistently 3 times a week, or they want to finally finish that short story that's been on their computer forever. But when it comes down to actually making the change, there's something holding them back. You may be at this stage in your writing as well. Have you ever thought, I know exactly what it is I need to be doing, so why the heck aren't I doing it? I think we've all run into this conundrum at some stage in our writing lives. We have a change that we desperately want to make, but when we try to move towards that change, it's like there's this invisible barrier there. We find ourselves running errands instead of writing, checking Instagram instead of opening our novel documents, vacuuming the living room instead of querying agents. I call this invisible barrier the hitch. If you've run into the hitch in your writing life, it's probably resulted in you feeling really down on yourself and maybe calling yourself lazy or unmotivated. But the hitch actually has nothing to do with laziness or lack of motivation. It has to do with a secret counter commitment you have that's getting in the way of the big conscious commitment you've made to yourself. Today, I'm going to give you a tool that will help you discover your hitch and unhook from it so you can start making the big strides you've always wanted to with your writing goals. Exercises like the one I'm about to show you have been crucial in my life in transforming me from a writer who hardly wrote at all and was intensely shy about claiming my identity as a writer to a writer who currently has a 2-book deal with a major publishing house and whose life is centered around writing and writing community. This is a simple but thought-provoking exercise from Harvard researcher Lisa Lahey's book, Immunity to Change. This 4-step process will give you some surprising insights into why you're not currently doing what you want to be doing, and will show you how to break out of that cycle of stuckness. You can watch this video all the way through to get a quick overview of the process, or you can pause when you reach each of the 4 questions to do some journaling about them. The first step in the process is to identify your commitment to yourself. What is the thing that you want to be doing that you aren't currently doing? This might be, I want to write 3 times a week, or I want to finally finish this short story and submit it to a magazine. So for example, you might want to say, my commitment is to finish my novel. And the importance of that to me is maybe an 8 or a 9. The next step is to list out the sabotaging behaviors that you are currently doing that undermine you reaching your commitment. So if your goal is to write 3 times a week, a sabotaging behavior might be watching Netflix instead of writing, or prioritizing housework instead of writing, or telling myself, I'll never get published anyway, so what's the point? Take some time with this. There might be quite a few sabotaging behaviors that you are taking part in, or there might be just 1 or 2 big ones. Once you've identified your sabotaging behaviors, we get to what I think is the most interesting part of this exercise, which is identifying your secret countercommitments. In the book Immunity to Change, Lisa Lahey's theory is that the reason we do these sabotaging behaviors is not because we don't want to change. It's not because we're unmotivated or uninterested in reaching our goal. What she found was that people had another commitment to themselves that they wanted to keep just as badly as they wanted to make the change. So the sabotaging behaviors actually weren't as illogical as they first appeared to be. They had a very logical purpose in these people's lives. So our goal now is to find out, what are your sabotaging behaviors helping you do? What secret counter commitment are they helping you keep in your life? I'd like you to select one of your sabotaging behaviors, perhaps the one that you do the most often. Then think about, how is this behavior helping support you in some other way? How is it helping you stay true to another commitment that you have in your life? I'll give you an example of how this played out with a recent client of mine who wanted to start submitting to literary magazines for the first time. We had talked about literary magazines, we'd gone through all the steps of submitting to literary magazines. She had all the resources at her fingertips to do it, but for a long time she avoided submitting her piece. So we went through this immunity to change process, and what we figured out was the reason she was delaying submitting to magazines is because her secret counter commitment was that she wanted to maintain her identity as a good writer. She knew she was a good writer. She knew this was her dream in life, but the prospect of facing rejection opened up the opportunity for life to tell her she was not a good writer. After we talked about this, I asked her to rate her counter commitment on a scale of 1 to 10. And it turned out that the importance of maintaining her identity as a good writer was a 10 out of 10 for her. So you can see how having a counter commitment that's really important to you can carry so much weight that it will undermine the thing that you've set out to do. If on the one hand you want to get published, and that's a 10 out of 10 goal for you, but on the other hand you want to protect your identity as a good writer, and that's a 10 out of 10 importance to you, it's going to be very difficult for you to make the shift that you want to make. So this is the part of the process that really requires the most thought. Sometimes you might need to talk it over with another person or a writing coach like me to get the insight that you need. But I find that people discover some really interesting things at this stage in the process. The fourth step in this process is to identify the underlying assumption that is keeping you locked into the system. Generally, the assumption is that your commitment and your counter commitment cannot coexist. So for example, you might articulate your underlying assumption as something like, if I submit my work to literary magazines and am rejected, my identity as a good writer will crumble. It might take a little bit of time to articulate your underlying assumption, but take a minute or two to see if you can identify what it is about your commitment and your counter commitment that you feel cannot coexist in your life. Undergoing this process can give you a lot of insight into your sabotaging behaviors, why they're happening, and what underlying assumption you've been carrying around that has made it difficult for you to make this change. One of the key things I like about this exercise is not only that it provides insight, but that it also helps you view your predicament more compassionately and with less self-criticism and judgment. You're not lazy and you don't lack discipline. You're simply caught between your commitments and your counter commitments. Obviously, just knowing this doesn't help you break the cycle yet, but it's a crucial part of the process. And in my next video, I'm going to show you the final step that will help you break out of this jam that you're in. For now, though, I'd love to hear from you. What did this process uncover for you? What counter commitments did you discover? And were you able to identify your underlying assumption, or is that something you're still grappling with? Feel free to reply directly to this email or DM me on Instagram, where my username is FreshInkAustin.